Welcome to California in Focus. I'm Keegan Kernodle. Joining me today is the Center Square's LA-based reporter, Kenneth Schrupp. Today we're talking about a California bill nearing passage that would create climate resilience districts to finance low-income housing in disaster-impacted areas. Kenneth, can you tell me more about this?
Hey, Keegan. These climate resilience districts would use tax increment financing on property tax values, so taking out bonds against expected increases from the creation of projects to actually do the projects. It's a little risky. Or use existing sales and use tax to build all kinds of things, really. One of the options is rebuilding any income-restricted affordable housing that might have been destroyed in a disaster or the areas near a disaster. These districts can include areas that are not in the disaster zone but near it, although that can only be up to 20% of the total district. But again, that is a cause of concern. They could also use this money for hardening infrastructure. It is true that there are some power lines that are implicated in the starting of the Eaton fire that destroyed Altadena, Sierra Madre, and parts of Pasadena. So there is a reason to want to fund this undergrounding. It's unclear why this has to be done with tax increment financing, or why this also has to be lumped in with low-income housing. This could also be used to build new low-income housing or affordable housing. This includes housing available for people up to moderate income. Moderate income is actually quite high for Los Angeles, so that wouldn't be too much of a problem unless people who were living in a building can't go back to the building because they're technically too high income. So you can imagine that there are some protected units where people might not be able to return. This is something that we've covered, though, in other stories regarding other Los Angeles-specific regulations. This funding could also be used for prevention of displacement. Prevention of displacement is usually a euphemism for rental assistance programs, so more housing subsidies to keep people in rentals. And then also for workforce development and job training programs. This usually is it just means more funding for generally skilled trades or unions that train local workers or train workers in the area, and then they work on these projects being paid prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is usually quite high and is required for public works projects, which most of these probably would be. Notably, there is an enduring labor shortage for skilled trades in California. So unclear if it really should be the state funding in doing this, because these projects have lower than expected graduation rates and rates of people entering the workforce compared to what they spend it on. But that's another question here. The real thing that people are concerned with, or even that the state assembly's local government committee, who's nominally nonpartisan analysts, have to present their findings on the bill and questions they might have on the bill to the committee. They did note that there are some changes here that are concerning to them. They say this bill condenses the meeting and notice requirements, reducing the number of meetings from 3 to 2 and foregoing the opportunity for the public to weigh in during a formalized protest process. Is posting a notice on its website and holding 2 public meetings sufficient to inform the public on the potential CRDs formation. Normally, when one of these special financing districts are being created, this is a process people have also criticized, and also why an earlier bill was shut down that would have similarly done something like this in LA County. The normal process is that if 25 to 50% of the residents and property owners over 18 file a protest, that special financing district creation is subject to an election. If it's over 50%, it is just shut down right there. SB 549, which we covered a few weeks ago and was ultimately put on pause by community pushback, people were very concerned that the 25% threshold was far too high. It would be very hard to initiate a formal protest proceeding that is successful. Well, CRD wouldn't even have a formal protest. If your local municipal body decides it wants to do a CRD, and whatever their procedures are, they pass those 2 resolutions, I believe, to create a CRD. That's it. There's very little you can do to stop that. You could even imagine a situation where in the city of Los Angeles, the city council member representing the Palisades might not want a CRD created, but that the rest of the city council decides, no, they want a CRD for LA. They want a CRD for the Palisades. That's going to happen regardless of what the local residents want, regardless of what the local city council member might even want. This is a concern that was brought up by the residents of Altadena. There's a group called California Unincorporated that noted that, Altadena is unincorporated, doesn't have a mayor and a city council. So the 5-member LA County Board of Supervisors would be the one voting on and creating this financing district for Altadena. And each of these Board of Supervisors represents over 1 million people. They represent more people than a member of Congress. So these residents said SB 782 would continue the state's unfair and undemocratic treatment of Californians whose voices, needs, and hopes are often overlooked because their communities are unincorporated. It's unclear what rights really these Altadena residents would have. They just have to hope that the County Board of Supervisors will not do something that harms them. And it's not clear whether that's going to be the outcome. All of this is happening against the backdrop of, as we talked about earlier, SB 549 would have created a resilient rebuilding authority that would have centralized the rebuilding of LA. It would have been able to buy lots, build properties, sell properties, train workers, buy the construction materials, take all of the state, local, and private and philanthropic financing. And it all would have been through this county office that doesn't clearly have any accountability to anyone. That was put on pause after community pushback, as we noted. Also last month, California Governor Gavin Newsom did announce the allocation of $101 million for, quote, multifamily low-income housing development, end quote, that will, quote again, contribute to a more equitable and resilient Los Angeles, end quote, with the priority for, quote again, geographic proximity to the fire perimeters of the Eaton, Hughes, and Palisades fires, end quote. So people are starting to get upset with possible changes in state law and allocation of state funding that would possibly change how communities are before and after the fires, and without much input from the residents themselves. Perez's office, the office of Sasha Perez, who authored this bill at the request of LA County. She did not respond to my request for comment, but I think we should end this by looking at what LA County argued was the reason for this bill. They said this bill is necessary to, quote, accelerate rebuilding through emergency procurement and expedited approvals, and that this bill will, quote, support housing, infrastructure, risk mitigation, small business recovery, and workforce development, ensuring communities like Los Angeles County can rebuild stronger and more resilient. With sustained opposition from the local residents, we'll see what happens here. But given that the bill, it's passed the state Senate and it's passed the state assembly, at least in its first committee, without any no votes, there were a couple abstentions, but no votes, suggests, it's going to continue to move forward unless residents do, unless there is sufficient pushback from residents. But at this rate, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, and that this bill will reach the governor's desk.
Well, thank you, Kenneth, for getting into this with us. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. This has been another episode of California in Focus.